mean, I'm talking about fallout. I mean, I'm talking about a whole, like, I can stop right there. Y'all better get clear today. Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel, Grounded in Purpose. My name is Kara, and in this video, I plan on talking about setting healthy boundaries. If you haven't already, go ahead and click the subscribe button and make sure that you check out some of my previous videos. So let's jump right into it. How many of you guys find that you are often the go-to person? You're the go-to person for projects at work, projects at school, friends, family. You are the dependable one. And with that, how many of you guys have had that internal conversation where you're like, you know what? Next time my answer is going to be no. And then next time comes up, you're at work and that opportunity comes up and that new initiative comes up and you're like, yeah, I think I can do it. And then you end up being so upset with yourself, and later on that resentment starts to settle in. Now, sometimes we find that resentment actually falling on ourselves. Other times we find it falling onto others. A lot of times when you are the go-to person, people from the outside looking in will look at some of your relationships that you have and they will feel like you are ultimately being taken advantage of. But I would like for you to look at it from another point of view. We ultimately cannot hold people accountable for the needs and wants that we have never communicated. So are you really being taken advantage of? Or are you just not being clear in your boundaries? So in creating healthy boundaries, it's important for us to have a level of self-awareness, a level of reflection, because we need to know and be clear on what our wants are, our desires, our needs, and essentially our identity. Who are we? And once you are clear on those areas, then you can take the time out to actually create clear, concise boundaries. And after you create those boundaries, one of the hardest parts is actually communicating those boundaries. And after we communicate those boundaries, it's also important that we maintain those boundaries as well. Setting boundaries essentially begins with showing up for you. Let's jump into the first step of setting a healthy boundary. So I know I mentioned self-awareness and reflection, and you may be wondering, what does that really look like? Well, I just want to kind of briefly mention that a lot of time our blueprint for boundaries, whether we are individuals who set really healthy and strong boundaries up front, or whether we are individuals who really struggle with boundaries, a lot of that stems from our childhood. How were boundaries modeled to you as a child? Whether we came from environments where healthy boundaries were the norm, or we came from environments where boundaries were often mixed. Did you find yourself as a child being one that respected boundaries? Were others respectful of your boundaries? Or what did that really look like for you? Because it really will do justice for you to dig deep and start there, because a lot of things will be revealed to you and a lot of things will start to make sense as you begin to connect who you truly are, your personal identity, and maybe why you struggle with the concept of boundaries to begin with. Another thing is that when we are trying to be self-aware, that also includes a level of emotional awareness. So when dealing with emotional awareness, a good place to start is to be in tune with yourself. I never go through life saying, you know, I just feel some type of way, because we hear that a lot, right? You know, you're going through the day and then you just don't know, like you just picked up some bad vibes, you know, you were just around some people that just really weren't in a place that you wanted it to be, and then now you're feeling some type of way. Like, those feelings have a name to it. And I think it's very important that as adults that we learn to mature in our emotional awareness, and that we learn the language needed to express ourselves in a healthy way, and that we really start to dig deep into those emotional layers, because there's so many layers. For instance, a lot of people who exhibit anger, if you find that you're someone who's like always angry, you don't really know why, anger is usually attached to pain, and underneath that layer of pain there's usually a layer of fear. And so you really got to get to the root of some of your own emotional issues, and I think that that will really help you into defining where you are in your life right now, and to really setting goals to where you want to be, and to really to start healing those areas so that you can be very clear with yourself on who you are and who you want to be, and so that you're able to communicate that with others as well. The thing is that we ultimately need to rid ourselves of the beliefs that no longer serve us. I'm not enough. I can't do it. I'm scared. What if they don't like me? What if they talk about me? I'm not pretty enough. If I don't do XYZ, they won't like me. I'm not smart enough. And the list goes on and on. So going on to point number 2, establishing boundaries. What does establishing boundaries look like? Once you have dug deep into your own personal issues and you have a level of self-awareness of who you are and your own identity, you will be able to establish what boundaries are healthy for your life and what boundaries do not serve purpose in your life. And again, boundaries are essentially about what's acceptable and what is not. So it is very important that we establish boundaries for all the relationships that we have in our life, regardless if they're personal, regardless if they're business. We all have a right to affirm our needs. Now, don't get it confused. Establishing boundaries is not about a power struggle and showing someone that you are more powerful than them, because then we're going to be going kind of into that realm of manipulation or into the realm of entitlement, and we definitely don't want to go there. I mean, essentially, I think about Jesus and in the Gospels and the Bible, and there are times, and I'm thinking, I want to say Matthew specifically, there was a time where Jesus, his brother, and his mother had came to a crowd, and they're like, hey, like, we know Jesus, like, hey, Jesus, like, we need you. And Jesus, he had to cut them down. Like, he's like, hey, like, my disciples are my brothers and they are my mother, like, they are my family. Like, you no longer are able to dictate this relationship through your level of entitlement. And then there's a time where Jesus is having a conversation with his disciples, and he's just letting them know, like, hey, my work is almost finished. And the disciples were trying to essentially manipulate Jesus into staying, like, hey, no, like, I know you said this is how it's supposed to be, but, like, we know better, you know? And so that was like a form of manipulation. And Jesus was very clear. He said, get behind me, Satan. So he was very clear with his boundaries. And that's why I really love the Gospels. Like, if y'all haven't read the Gospels, like, I really encourage you to read the Gospels, because Jesus was really good at setting his boundaries. But I think that the reason why he was such a great boundary setter is the fact that he was very clear on who he was, and he knew his identity, and he knew that he had a greater purpose. Another point to add is that Jesus was able to accept his limitations. And I feel like that is something that a lot of us battle with, is accepting our limitations. We can't be everywhere. We can't be everything for everyone. And so going back to my point, you'll be able to establish boundaries once you are clear on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable for the relationships in your life. And to my third point, communication. Oh my goodness, this is like the hardest part. Like I said, starting off the video, like, a lot of times we have these internal dialogues, but when it comes to actually communicating and using the language that we need to not be hurtful or not to minimize others, because when we're setting boundaries, this is a level of respect that we want to give, but a level that we want to be reciprocated. So we want to make sure that we're doing it in love, and that we're not just like finding this way to just push people out of our lives. Now, granted, if you need to do some inventory with the people in your life, that's one thing, but those that you really want in your life and you just want to make sure that you're setting those boundaries for, it's very important that you are clear and concise, and that you're coming from a place of love with them. So I think that one of the perfect scriptures that kind of aligns with communicating boundaries is Matthew 5:37, which says, but let your yes be yes and your no be no. Oh, I mean, I'm talking about fallout. I mean, I'm talking about a whole, shout. That, I mean, right there, I can just stop right there. I can stop right there. Y'all better get clear today, because it truly isn't until you communicate those boundaries that accountability is now attached. Deuteronomy 29:29 talks about how God has secrets that are known to no one, but how we are not accountable to those secrets. However, we are accountable to the things that are revealed to us. Going to my fourth point, we have to make sure that we maintain those boundaries. Now, this is where the challenge may come in for some of us, because say we get to the point where we're able to reflect, we know what we want, we're clear about what we want, we communicate what we want, and then people, they don't want to be held accountable for their actions. See, now we have decisions to make, right? So now I get to be the jury when it comes to the things that are acceptable in my life. And I think that you really have to sit down and have conversations with them and let them know, like, hey, I need to remind you, this is my boundary and you've crossed it, and you need to be able to communicate how that makes you feel. When you are maintaining those boundaries, don't let someone make a liar out of you. So let your yes be yes, let your no be no. As the old folks used to say, don't write a check that you can't cash. There has to be a follow through. And so in closing, remember, when we're setting healthy boundaries, we first have to start with a level of self-awareness and reflection. We have to be clear with the boundaries that we establish. We have to communicate our boundaries effectively and concisely, and we gotta have that follow through. And I just want to leave you all with this: even if you have never established clear boundaries or communicated them effectively with the individuals in your life, that it is not too late. Today is a new day. Get clear, set those boundaries, communicate those boundaries, and know that you matter. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you feel like it was a blessing to you, please make sure that you share. Make sure you give me a thumbs up, comment. I love interacting with you all, and I hope to talk to you all soon. Thank you. Goodbye.